Thank you, Dr. Lawford. I see myself as a worker, and that was a very kind way. But I also want to give full appreciation to that profound African scientist, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, who gave birth to us all. And he continues, as others are working, but continues right along to set new horizons. And this morning I've had just a most profound experience, because I've had a chance to be given back to me a more correct name for my own call. And I now hear it as Kim Ware. Right. And I accept that fully. Right. The presentation this morning is entitled on the pineal and the pineal. It's a long title. And to keep step with the flow, of course, we're going to modify and adjust. And I have a series of slides which I will kind of go through in a very rapid fashion, with full confidence that among my people, who all themselves are all geniuses, that though it may be just a fraction of a second, that they will be on the screen. You've heard them before. It lives in your blood, and you know them. I would like to also give an appreciation to the many forces that have allowed me to thrive and survive, and also the most excellent teachers who have been so patient and so loving, both sisters and brothers, in teaching me and allowing me to stand on their shoulders. So the work that we're sharing this morning, and me in particular, is not my work. It's a collective work that is really eons old. And I certainly look forward to my students to stand on my shoulders and to correct me, because that is a correct move towards truth. And in terms of methodology, yes, we must read our own people's writing, because as I'm leading to my own presentation, it was the collective wisdom over a period which it is kind of hard for us to grasp. It was a collective wisdom of not a few hundred years, not even a few thousand years, but as I begin to see it now, with the collective, analytical, whatever way you want to say it, thought of several millions of years of collected wisdom. And so it is like walking into a library of 1,000 miles high and 1,000 miles long and saying, is there anything to Kim? And to see it jam-packed with books. And to know that though the physical structure has changed somewhat, that all of that lives in its completeness in the air around us, and very importantly, in our blood. And that we have not lost it. And that we can indeed listen again. And to make what is inner a more outer thing and inner thing, and make it whole. So let's move in rapid fire in a kind of quick sequence that you're more than capable of handling. And I do this so we can have a little time for question and answers at the end. Now, this slide is a very hard to see slide, and I put it up here to raise a question. This is a slide of a map of Antarctica, a continent found at the head of our own continent. It is a map that shows Antarctica, and it shows the outline of Antarctica before it was covered over in ice. So I raised to you a question that raised up in me. How did someone know the outline of Antarctica before it was covered over in ice, and knowing that this map came before the time of the European? If we raise that question, then we raise a question of how long is our science? To be able to have mapped not only Antarctica before it was the case tonight meant that you had already mapped the world. And to have the kind of mathematics to do such, and geology and psychology and writing and discussion and libraries and universities and excellent mothers and excellent fathers and excellent female and male teachers, means it was a very, very high-tech culture. It not only mapped the planet, but mapped the universe. And very importantly, mapped the inner world universe and saw that they were all one. We know that these were none others than our own parents, who looked just like that, who at times would increase in size to become giant size, what we call 6 feet and over, 7, who knows? And other times, because of very complex interrelationships with electromagnetic field change, would become small in size. But it was these people who were called, some called Anu, or other names, that migrated around the world in excess of 1 million years ago. And it was these people who were the founders of what we call Kemet. And when we talk about Nile Valley civilization, and knowing that Holy Land from which we all sprang was through the birthplace that came from these African mothers and fathers. Khufu, the pharaoh that was one in the 3rd dynasty. This is a slide that I would use for a less advanced audience, but I can quickly move. You are fully aware of all of this. Again, these slides can be turned around. I'm always making these kind of mistakes. But anyway, Pharaoh Nominal, who founded the 1st dynasty. Then we raised the question, was it the first unification? Had there been other prior unification events? What nations in the Nile Valley, Dr. Ben made reference to in another setting, how many nations before, and how are they all one? And here, this comes from the tomb of Ramses VI, and it's a very important one because in the center, of course, in that face that you see in the solar bark, the one that just happened to be defaced, is the head of sun god Ra, as Africans, as Kemets, define them and visualize them. A close-up drawing removes all question. And we wonder why. How could that face have been defaced? It was not an accident of moisture. It was a selective attempt to deface and cover over our knowledge, knowing full well that in the immediate present that you would sit in rooms like this and would then read your own language, and then that game would be over. So we may have to make sense of what Dr. Francis Wilson has said. For them to have launched a biological warfare in this past 2 decades can only mean that it's a last-ditch attempt because we are that close on recapture. That's all that it can mean. These are the Africans on the center and on the left. And the others were how we saw them, again, from the tomb of Ramses. This is how we visualized ourselves, rising from a menton, not in some demonic description of the phallic symbol, seeing it come and all the symbolism, as I, as a psychiatrist, one who swims in symbolism. But here we have the phallic symbol rising from the umbilical cord. And it is a divine black as he rises from a horizontal level to an erect level with an upstretched hand. And he is all black in color. This one, who we would know as Osir, the perfect black, the guardian of Amenta, or the all black inner world, standing before the 4 sons of Haru. The raising of the Egypt, again the same statement being made again. The raising from a unconscious or a sleep state to a state of awareness. Just becoming aware of who you are and learning how to use who you are to be about your work. The fertilization, again, a divine relationship in which the sky goddess Nut is being fertilized by the earth god. And we see a phallic symbol again about to impregnate the umbilical cord, something that the sisters can tell us about. But again, so many levels of birth and so many levels of understanding about what is this thing inside of us. How could we, as a people, be able to understand such a thing? And what are we saying in the past about all that has been and all that will be? What is this about a fertilization of the sky? And how are planets born under this same symbolic theme? How are we born on this same symbolic theme? How are atoms born under the same symbolic theme? Knowing again that as one would pass on to another level, it took knowledge to know how to traverse the so-called amenta. So here is the Pharaoh Tutankhamun and the opening of the mouth ceremony, as it is found all around the world, even in South America before there ever was a Columbus. The same kind of procedures being found, the same kind of instruments being used to give this person the words of power, the words of certain vibratory rates, to be able to unlock certain states inside of one's own being. Again, the opening of the mouth ceremony in terms of the being given the words of power, to be able to know the right word to unlock a particular gate inside and outside oneself, as one would evoke those levels or nectars that are emergent around us. This is very deep Kemetic psychology. And in other words, we hear about it under the heading of evocation, or we hear about it in divination. The same thing, where a knowledge of vibratory rate and being exact to evoke things. That you can't do it a key has an exact fit, in other words. Here we have again the concept of the God from whom creating the man and woman on the potter's wheel. And here we have again the notion of the Ka and also the Benu bird, again symbolizing that there's something inside of us, in every Kemet person, that allows us not to be detached, as Sister Ricketti has said, Professor Ricketti has said, not to be detached, but to be a part of us. But when we get deep into our Chem factor, we fly, literally. The expansion that takes place is without limit. It is an ability to see our relationship with infinity. Now, these sound like very way-out words, but they're not way-out words. It's a statement of mental slavery, where they make us try to think that it's impossible. It's going to lead to you becoming a vampire. It's going to lead to you becoming yourself. Again, the Ba and Ra, this is someone else's name attached to it. Again, a secondary, not a tertiary source, in terms of the two that are facing each other. So I have to learn my own language and to come back to it. Because I'm firmly convinced that when we, quote, have these different states that come to us, even at night and in the daytime, all times, 24 hours, it's not just nighttime dream, it's 24 hours, that ancestral world is trying to speak to us 24 hours a day, with 24 hours a day. That if we can just hear the language, know it. I mean, do I really expect my ancestral world to speak to me in English? Black English would get more to it. And then I see, and then I realize, just things that are just not coincidences. It just hit me the other day at the place that I grew up off of Central Avenue, and other parts off El Segundo, saying a place that we call Watts. I said, no, wait a minute. Now, Watts is the name Wa'at. Could that be that deep? So things that we have, there's so many ways so many levels that just all around us, we just don't, again, becoming aware. Here we see the Pharaonic crown, and a very important thing, again, things come to you with the feather of Ma'at. Question comes, it's only a question at this point in time. How does the feather of Ma'at relate to the Ba, or the Ba and Ka birds? How does that relate, and how does the feather relate to that bird? And why do we have the coil? And that coil is about 3.14. Then we get to another question of the coil that has 3 and some decimal points with a, quote, black dot center. So again, those are all questions. I mean, just the detailed way in which our ancestors may have presented very profound issues and on so many levels of meaning. The notion that the beetle or Kempera may have a relationship to the idea of the top of the head or the crown. Choosing an anthropomorphic symbol or our image because it relates to an equivalent concept in the anatomy of the netter human. And here we see this concept of the sutures that correspond to the Kepra beetle, showing that there is something, as we talk about Kepra rolling the sun disk across the sky, and the crowns of our head being illuminated by an aspect of ray as it rolls across the sky. But do we dare consider what relationship do we have to assist the sun as it rolls across the sky? Now another question comes up in terms of how, even in that book by Piankanov on the Shrine of Takakam, he kind of stepped back from it, as we would expect him to do given his consciousness and given his orientation. But it raised the question of the souls of men revivifying the sun as the sun passed through Amenta. So how do we share in exchanging light? What light do we give off that revivifies stellar bodies? So that's, of course, a crazy thought. But we must be beyond crazy to embrace ourselves. We must see that, I think, come to awareness that the oppressor has labeled things unconsciously and also intentionally with the most horrible meanings as a means to turn us away from things that would lead to our own resurrection. And that it is a very important thing to not let, if your mind raises a question, that's the only way, that's the only thing that you need. If it came up in your mind, then that is more important than ever getting a Nobel Prize. As a matter of fact, if you got a Nobel Prize, you better ask what's going on. Get a kiss of death by somebody who invented dynamite that killed and enslaved your people. That would be a horrible gift that I would never take. It wouldn't have anything to do with any such thing. But if my own mind came on, if my child told me, Dad, that makes sense to me. Sister Raquel or Dr. Ben or Dr. Lagan told me that, I would say, oh, wow. Or Brother Desi, or Sister Elaine, or others told me that, I would say, oh yeah, all right now, I'll follow up on that. So in other words, if your mind flashes it to you, then treasure it. Because we don't know how many of the answers are trying to pass something on to you right now for you to do. The notion of the head being born out of the lily, the so-called flowering process as one touches the crown. The lily that is, quote, tightly bound, and then it unfurls. And then out of that most fragrant flower comes an aspect of yourself. I've had some experiences sometimes in which in this Kim Ware system that promotes and allows that. And here it is from the tomb of Tahakuman, the same concept. That in our, and we use the head, we could really put the entire body in it, no doubt. We emerge out of that. There's something deep inside of us. Again, the mask. Again, the actual face, the human form. How could we? How crazy is the game that in 1979 the part of that came here in terms of an exhibit, and there was a debate: was he black? And yet these photographs set right in Oxford University. And the people knew. So hey, I fully know that the game is that deep. The people are not even, the adversary is intentionally covering up mountains of knowledge. It is a war of knowledge. Again, a black man and a black skin and a black body. Kim. The notion of the symbolism of his shrines, these 4 boxes placed one inside the other, and between box 2 and 1, a thin film of linen cloth with gold stars embroidered upon it, in which they were giving a knowledge of their statement, of the collective understanding of scientific investigation that encompasses, I think, millions of years. Millions of years. The things found on the Pharaonic crown not only symbolize upper and lower region, but in terms of the upper and lower aspect of ourselves, not in a hierarchical sense, but because each part of us is profound and divine. Pharaoh Shephren, with the Horus or Horu hawk rising from his back, embracing the sides of him. Again, inside of us, something that profound inside of our Kim is that profound, waiting to emerge, waiting to arise, but also demanding sweat, demanding a lifetime of discipline, a use of science, and a profound respect of each other. Side view. Again, showing just the different types, crowns, and all the idea of the feather of mind, of upper and lower Kemet. The Benu bird, another name for Benu bird, and it is from this that came the European concept of the stork. But they don't tell you that Benu means the black bird. So a black bird brought in the little new ones and the idea of Kemet. Again, raising the hands in praise to the netters. Again, on the very top of that person's head, we see, again, that bird factor standing on the crown of the head. And again, from the umbilical cord, there emerges that phallus, or that, if you will, that canal from which that ancestral seed passes to then pass to the holy heaven of the black woman's heaven or womb. The diadem crown that was found on top of Tutankhamun's head, and found again the wrapping of that head with a full appreciation for levels of understanding that I just am just a total novice at beginning to understand. But that there was an extra wad of bandages placed on top, or linen cloth placed on top, again to symbolize, perhaps, the importance of what was in the top of that head, or the crown. The linen cloth with the beads embroidered on the top, again symbolizing the things that were present in the serpentine fashion, which I've just now learned that the serpents were called Kim. Oh, I just can't wait to work with that. God Patha, again with a blue crown on his head. The same something in the top of us that binds us to the heavens. Yes, we are divine. Just a diagram showing the same concept, the Ayam, Horu, and Pineal, that are found in somewhat of that same region. And this just came to me this morning. Now I look at this and see that this particular aspect paints the crown of Tutankhamun wearing a black crown. And I just began to, the answers are helping, I think, trying to make me say, brother, you better study some more. Because look at this here. So that's a point to be raised. From the right shrine of the second shrine to Tutankhamun, the right panel, I will probably have spent at least another lifetime just working with one panel. But I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to stay on it until I have got all that I could possibly see in it. And I'm just beginning. I've now been at it 7 years. But now that I learn a bit more and I get some additional help with Sister Ricchetti and others, especially Sister Ricchetti, Professor Ricchetti, that I can see that there's so much. When I saw this in a book, and then I went with Dr. Benu on a trip to Kemet, and I said, well, I will never see that. I don't know where they got that from. And I walked up on the second shrine, and here I was, a psychiatrist who'd been studying the pineal about 5 years before I saw that. I said, goodness, look at that star putting rays of light into the anatomical site of the pineal gland. I know the pineal gland produces the hormone melatonin during darkness and serotonin during daytime. You mean my people knew neuroendocrinology 3,300 years ago? And it was just now rediscovered this in 1958 AD? I said, could the cover-up be that great? And yes, it is. A closer up, so you can see with yourself. Here is the Kim, a Kim serpent putting rays of light to the anatomical site where the pineal and pituitary glands are. And then stars putting rays of light to the top of it. Now the other parts of that shrine will show the moon putting rays of light into the neck and the lower and other parts of the body. And we have the whole question of the lunar phase and the solar phase as they relate to gates of consciousness in terms of us. Our people knew that. And it ain't hardly known today. The idea of the phallus, put in an old part of the temple where the phallus says that something inside of that phallus conveys the ancestral world. That in the life seed of Africans, as we pass that sperm on to that egg, we're passing on millions of years of African family. And we just don't even know where all of us came from in terms of, are you a flashback 4,000 years ago, 3,000, and you got some kind of aspect to do right now? Just, we don't even know. And then we're told that we are slaves, or recently released slaves. And here we are, the rulers of the world, the rulers of ourselves, waking up. And yes, for that reason, and many others, biological warfare is rampant today in the form of AIDS, as Dr. Wellesley said yesterday. Now here are the writings that Professor Riquetti Wimpy was so kind to send to me, and my little happy, I've got the slide in backwards, but anyway, it was listing the 6 figures that stood receiving light. First one getting from the Kim snake. And so they were all these names, and I had seen it in Pineal Gland's work, but a little, that thing that Dr. Wilson talked about yesterday, that little feeling inside of you that won't let you rest. And no, that ain't right, brother. You better you better go to a higher source. You can't even read the hieroglyphics at this point in time because you have been too lazy to do so. No other reason but that. You've been too afraid. You've been too captured by the drama of the educational system that you went through. And if you are going to be more in love than you are afraid, you'll throw that aside. So that's my reasons for not having life. I don't know about others, but those are my own. That I could sense that there were other things to it. And so that indeed there are other names to it. And I can look at it visually. And each time I look at it, I have to look at it and then sit on it and let it incubate for a few hours or days and come back and let it flash back on me. And then as I learn and study the medium, I can gain a much greater insight to what our people have written after, again, millions of years of scientific investigation by African women and African men. This concept, again, is turned back, which point is raised. This is from C.G. Jung and the so-called Western psychiatrists and psychologists who come up with an awareness that, yes, there are parts of us that have access to the collective unconscious and the archaic unconscious. In other words, they know that they're inside of the so-called mind, that there are ancestral memories that go all the way back. And I would add, even beyond the physical human condensation. Yes. So then we get to a whole question of beyond the atom. Yes. But that's what we can conceive. Yes. Yes, we are divine. Yes. Again, the different levels, family, nations, and all that inside of us. But what happens to the European when he runs up to his black mama? There ain't no other mama. No other mothers. As recently as 20,000 years ago, or 25, no other mothers on the planet. And we're talking about millions of years of human experience. When they run to that, they see King Kong, Darth Vader. Here are the images. They don't see what you and I see. Sweet Mother Dear, Big Mama. They don't see that. They become afraid. They get afraid of being, quotes, drowning in a sea of blackness. I said, oh, bring it on, sweetheart. bring it on. You know, take me on to heaven. Oh, yeah. I don't mind getting out of space. I just love it, love it, love it. You know, but somebody else has a different kind of hookup, and without those chemical keys, it can be demonic. But again, as there is a springtime, there's also a winter in terms of consciousness and in terms of human families. So we're coming out of winter, headed into springtime again. And this last winter really occurred, ain't no doubt about that. But we know that plants burst forward again. And this is an African people who went to sleep in hibernation during the winter to emerge in spring. Again, Sigmund Freud's death, he wasn't going to tell you that he had studied the unconscious and got from African sources, but there it is. You can go to his library in London, and you can see it. There it is. And in his book that he wrote 1 year before he passed away, because I think he was trying to get straight. Because the inner world don't even accept a dollar bill. You can't buy nothing in the inner world with a dollar bill. You can be a billionaire and still jump in the lake of fire inside the inner world. That don't take nothing. Your heart must be weighed based upon your conduct with your fellows. Again, just closer abuse, and now we'll pick the pace up. We know that they studied under us in Rome. They protected the Isaiah rights. We know that there's been a rip-off of all of our culture. We know that tomorrow they will celebrate Easter, and that it relates to an astronomical event that affects consciousness. We know that when we read that in the so-called, again, a revision of our own sacred books called the Bible, that when supposedly the Holy Ghost passed through the so-called Passover, it was the Kemetic tau cross that was the mark that was left on the door, supposedly, and whatever that might mean. That it was a tau or T cross upon which the so-called Christ figure was supposedly crucified, but that came from the earlier things that we studied in Kemetic literature relative to Osiris, and especially Horus, and even older forms that would take us even back to Bes and beyond. We know that. We know that there are, in terms of the Coptic faith, in terms of our own visualizations of the Christ figure, but again with older, the Horus principle and the Osirian, and even Apatha, and even older. This is from the book of Melanin the Pineal. But we don't know what the original African concepts were. They related to the profound symbolism of why would you hold a right triangle, a right angle in your hand? What is the geometrical and numerical symbolism of the so-called religion? And that is indeed an aspect of that. Again, this is chem-ware. How the cascade of glands that turn on and open up and promote the production of melanin or chem in skin from the brain, or from the Horus principle in the forehead. Again, the chem principle or the chem system in brain and skin throughout the nature of the human form. An actual picture of a calcified Horus, a very common occurrence in others, and a much less frequent occurrence in us, that leads to only half as much of the chem principle in the brain, or melatonin, and perhaps leads to a very partial insight or access to a mental, showing that all of these things in the chem system originate from that black early ball of cells after the fertilization of the in the holy womb of the African woman by the life seed of the black man. That all these things, be it chem in the inner ear, chem in the meninges of the brain, be it chem in the oral mucosa of the mouth, be it chem in the auditory canal, be it chem in the different organs of the body, be it chem in the skin, that all of these things come from an infinitesimal thing called the life egg. And indeed, it is a chem thing. There it is, in the skin, organized over the nucleus. Not only to shelter it, but to nurture the nucleus of skin cells. There it is in the skins of others. Less nurturing going on. There it is in terms of where we have a cross-section of the brain. There it is showing the internal ocean inside of us, from which the dews of heaven, or the cerebral spinal fluid, or freeways, which is chem factor, bathes the internal and external aspects of the brain. And doesn't it look like a bird to you? They even call it wings. And here we have a bird inside of our own brains. And our ancients said, our parents told us that there was a bird rising up out of our heads. There it is again. The cerebral spinal ventricular system. Birds rising up inside of our heads. Again, as I do things backwards, I'm really dealing with what my teacher would say, with the backside of Eden. But anyway, the chemical pathway. But let me just hurry on, because now this is a picture from Bubastis, from the Egyptian Exploration Fund. And this book was written in the 1890s. It is a picture of one of the Hyksos kings, Asiatic kings, one of the first ones who come in and defile our land and take over the northern parts. Look at this face well. Know it when you see it. They say that there are no faces of it found. There it is. Again, this is one that was hidden, now hidden away, not to be presented out in public. African people, no question. African people, in terms of the goddess Ceres in the times of the Greeks, even the African Rome, in Rome. African people, every one of them on this table, all of them, hundreds of thousands of years old. The cradle of mankind, indeed our home. We all know at this point in time that as of 300 million years ago, there's only one continent. All of them grouped around the African continent prior to the separation with continental drift on the tectonic plates. But in so many levels, the home, that African chem home. And need we not forget that as we access our inner worlds, we have to pay homage and listen to the pain and the rage and the hope and the wishes of our parents, now departed, who paid a price for us to be here today. Again, Ramses and the present. The present. The present and the past, knowing words of power to move through. Again, these are people in rulership. They live in our blood this very second. They live in our blood this very second. They live in our blood this very second. We just need to see them. Thank you.
In order for us to proceed with the afternoon session, I'll dispense with the questions after this presentation, and you all can ask Dr. King whatever questions you have in the luncheon talk. So we'll adjourn now for the luncheon talks and reconvene in 2 hours here.
You have no rules on here.
Okay, and the assignment for the luncheon talks are outside, posted outside, so you check them as you go out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.